Well, not
You know
necessarily.
how much I hate doing the intro. Welcome to another edition of the Supernatural Side Salad Show. Right, so do you want to lead with that, Cats, then?
Yeah, sure. Um, it, these two women were going to see this doctor, and they were like, they'd already seen this doctor before with their child, but they went to see him again, and another doctor came in, and the doctor. They asked, "Well, where's the other doctor?" Well, they said, "Well, she prayed on it, and she was refusing to be
Well, you
to
know how much I
give."
hate the intro. Welcome to another edition of the Supernatural Side Salad Show.
Um,
I think you're playing the author here.
um, so yeah, so she was like against their baby because they were lesbians. That's that's really Christian.
So what? The doctor
So
was.
what
The
happened?
doctor was. Sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead.
No. I was just going to ask, did one doctor leave and refuse to deal with them, and another doctor came in and did deal with them, or they all flat out refused to deal with them, or what happened?
Oh, it was just the one, but it's just like, um, how much of a dick do you have to be to not help a child? That just seems petty to me. Just to like, oh, you're this, so I'm not gonna help your child, and even though I'm a doctor and I'm vowed to help people.
Well,
Yeah.
if I would be on the medical board and had to judge this, I would sack him from his job because basically he took a vote as a doctor to help everyone, and that child cannot help itself that it happens to have two mothers. So what's his fucking problem? I would say.
Her fucking problem. She's Christian apparently. She prayed about it, and apparently God spoke to her. Kind of glad she didn't treat that child.
Real Samaritan of him, of her.
Yeah, it's a bit disappointing when like some core found belief or something just contradicts with the doctor's reality, which is what they're there for, which is to treat patients, and they're just prepared to throw that aside because of voice in their head or something like that. I mean, and if it's getting to that point, it's sort of like you need to reassess your um, spiritual views, religious views, whatever they might be. They're too poignant and they're incorrect. If you think
Uh,
that they have some impact,
yeah.
then
Well,
yeah.
this all stems from the laws that they want to pass. It's just like emergency individuals don't have to treat gay people or some bullshit like that. This is all fucking homophobic shit that they're trying to pass through local states. I mean,
It's funny that I've seen comparisons with a lot of these arguments for particularly against gay marriage, which are you can just replace them. There was one, I think there was a guy who did a speech at one in America, I think it was. I don't know which state or which part of the country, but and he basically did a white supremacist sort of argument speech from like the I don't know 50s or whatever it was when the abolition was, and he replaced it with like he just replaced it with gay, and then so basically and marriage instead of I think slavery, and he did the whole speech, and it's just like pretty clear and evident. So it's just like get with the times, this won't last. Get out the way.
I'm just curious about the legality of this. I mean, surely it is illegal to discriminate based on the parents'
sexuality, surely.
Yeah, I would have thought this person would have been prosecuted, or at the very least sacked for doing this.
I don't know what happened to the doctor. I think she should be fired. I think anyone uh the hospital.
Was it literally like a duck-out situation, and she instantly got a replacement doctor, which was just as qualified and suited, and that's all that happened? Because, I mean, if that's all that happened, I mean, at the end of the day, I
I
mean,
think that is what happened. I was reading the Washington Post article about it, and apparently another doctor introduced him or herself. I'm not
yeah.
sure whether it is, but he explained that Dr. Roy, I guess was her name, that she had preyed on and won't be able to care for Bay, who was the baby. And this Dr. Karam was who did that. Told us she didn't even come to the office that morning because she didn't want to see us. And then Dr. Roy later wrote to the couple that she felt that she would not be able to develop the personal patient-doctor relationships that I normally do with my patients, which I don't know, in a different context, I mean, I find this kind of bigotry really disgusting, like the rest of you, but in some ways, she felt that it wouldn't be a good match as far as her ability to care for them, even though for irrational reasons. So I don't think she really acted in a way that was malpractice. It certainly was bigoted and enlightened, but
She knew that the child would get care.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so maybe.
I wonder what would have happened if I entered the practice and I entered the office, her office, and I would see a cross on the wall and a picture of Jesus, and I would ask her, "Are you Christian?" And she would answer me, "Yes, I am a Christian." And I would say, "Well, I want somebody who is reasonable and logical, so get me an atheist doctor." And I wonder what would have happened in the newspapers then.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think they would cry out a bad atheist left and right, but the moment it is a Christian doctor, nobody seems to care. At least Christians. I know. And then what if a surgeon in a hospital would be working in the emergency room, and two lesbian females who were in a car crash would enter the emergency room? Would he also refuse to treat them? It doesn't make sense. It's so stupid.
Well, this
Yeah.
this story got national coverage, so I wouldn't say that people don't care about it, and I'm sure, uh, depending on the area, this may help her or hurt her if she's in a fairly enlightened area. A lot of people may not want to use her or that practice anymore because of this kind of bigotry. Uh, on the other hand, if she's in a Bible thumping area, she may actually increase her business. I don't know.
I think that people just need to grow the fuck up and maybe work with people they not necessarily wanted to work with, because if she's a doctor, is she gonna where the hell is she gonna go? Arkansas? Fucking backwoods doctor somewhere?
Well, there are more places in the U.S. where she probably, with that mindset, would be pretty welcome. Unfortunately, there are, uh, pretty rural areas. There's the Bible Belt, so she would have more choices than just Arkansas, unfortunately.
Actually, if I'm honest, it wasn't as bad as I originally thought based on what you've said. So I mean, she didn't. It wasn't just that the couple turned up with their child and then she said get out because they were a lesbian couple. It was she did at least arrange for another doctor to do it. So
Right.
Clickbait title: Doctor kicks out lesbian couples kid. What? Click that. Oh, what? Reading more into it. Oh shit!
Right.
What website am I on?
And she felt like if she had been there and confronted them directly, that it would have further undermined or, made the experience even more negative. So she chose not to do so, which despite her irrational religious beliefs, it seems like she probably handled it, or at least tried to handle it in the most sensitive way possible.
now actually, based on what you've said and the fact that she did seem to, I mean, she did try her best to, because I can understand that if someone is brought up and genuinely thinks that homosexuality is a sin or whatever, you know, I guess it's difficult because obviously their irrational belief shouldn't infringe on anyone else's rights, but on the other hand, if it's not inconveniencing anyone else, and the fact that it was passed on to another doctor, I guess, I mean, I'm sort of I don't think I would be I would just put it this way, I'd be uncomfortable if she was fired after this. I think
Yeah, me too.
because it doesn't sound as bad as I originally thought it was, because the impression I originally got was that a couple turned up and then their child was kicked out because they were a lesbian couple, and instead it was just a pre-arrangement that was passed on to another doctor, which doesn't sound quite as bad as it. I don't know. I'm sort of half about this, because she didn't make a scene about it. I think, I don't know what.
Well,
Well, I just want to say this goes into another problem as well, is that people that are better than their religion, people are better than Christianity, and they're more moral than the Christian religion is, and they just run into these conflicts, and they know what's wrong, uh, you know, and but because of their faith, they have to follow it because don't want to be in hell or not exist or some stupid shit. So it it's a really big problem, and Christians today think, well, you can't change the Bible. You can change
Especially
it like 34 fucking times throughout history. You can change it. Just rip pages out. Go ahead.
teaching like individual people that they can listen to a voice in their head, or something can come to them in their mind, which is something from outside of their mind, and that they should take that on board, whatever the hell it is, because it's come from somewhere else. And it just gives people, I mean, you're just susceptible to whatever someone's mind sort of contorts for them, sort of thing. I mean, it's a bad way of going, I would think.
I think there has to be a little bit of sympathy here, though, because if you've been indoctrinated as a child, and then by the time you're an adult, for a lot of people it's too late. I mean, if you genuinely believe that some of these perfectly harmless things are sins, then you might be genuinely worried about going to hell or something. I mean, that's celestial blackmail. I mean, I can understand why people might be scared of that.
Well, no, that would only count if she herself was a lesbian. She was asked to help a lesbian couple, the child of a lesbian couple, even. So if even if it is a sin, it would not reflect on her. She would only be doing her good Samaritan job.
Yeah, exactly. You can't even. There's no
one thing,
sense.
one thing I also noticed from the article, and I had just skimmed it before, was that she had actually met with them on a prenatal visit, and apparently the couple thought that everything was fine, so she did give this a try, I guess, give a go at it, and it sounds to me like she just, if we're talking about prenatal care, I think we're talking more about the mechanics of what needs to be done health-wise, and I've never had any experience with this, nor have I, I've not been with anybody who's had a child and had this experience, but it sounds like the care is more than just there has to be a good fit, doctor-patient fit, and that if the dynamic is not there, or there's something that I would assume gives the caregiver discomfort, maybe it could be something else, maybe a crime that somebody had committed. And I certainly don't compare that to being a lesbian or anything like that, but she felt she seemed to take ownership of that it was her problem, or that she had prayed about it. So therefore, it sounds like she put doctor patient care on as top priority, and that she didn't feel like she was the best fit for them and could serve them in the way that she thought they should be served. And so I have to. Well, I don't really care for the reasons at all. I think she probably acted honorably in terms of her obligations to the patient.
No, but that's probably only what she said to make it sound okay and good. But
Oh,
I,
well, we
I
can't
really think that
that. We don't
in
know.
her own
We
mind.
don't know whether we don't mind with that.
Well,
This is
imagine if an EMT did that. It's just like, I can't work on them right now. They're gay. It's just like, even if though,
yeah, yeah. It
it's just
doesn't
like,
correlate with a lot of other different areas. Like if you apply the same sort of rule, but I mean, as Jeff said, I mean, specifically in the idea about the care involved with the prenatal care and sort of that sounds stupid, but you need to be invested in this child. I mean, these parents are obviously very invested in the child, um, and so she obviously felt she couldn't apply herself the way she's supposed to do the job. I mean, yeah,
Well, it's
sort of.
it's still bullshit because no, I just said the car accident. Suppose these two women are walking hand in hand down the street, and the doctor is sitting in a cafe, and she sees these two women walk on the street, and one of these two lesbians gets a heart attack. Will she go the other way, or will she go and help them? Because if she already has a
Should
problem
go
now with
help.
these two women being a lesbian, then
That's what I mean.
she wouldn't help. Uh,
Well, we don't know that
We
it
don't know
doesn't.
for sure.
Yeah, it doesn't
I mean,
follow that she would not help somebody in an emergency situation. This was she was part of a practice, and for whatever reason, I would assume if there was uh, a consultation or a prenatal visit, and there was just not a good chemistry between the parents for whatever reason, they're just not a mutual respect or whatever, that she would refer the patient to another doctor, just as
yeah, there was time. Yeah.
patients often ask to see other doctors for the similar reasons. Maybe if the patient didn't like a lesbian doctor, they would be within their rights to ask for another doctor as well. So, I again, I think these are really narrow-minded and bad reasons to not associate with people. But under the circumstances, I don't think she should be penalized, except to the extent that she may, lose some business, which is justified if that's the reason why she did.
No,
Especially if she leaves with doctor.
I'm inclined to sort of agree with you there, Jeff. I'm curious though. Why is this a story in the first place? I mean, who reported this to the media? Because I mean, if it was just this, then someone has blown this out of all proportion, and I'm just curious as to how this has become a story in the first place.
well, I think it's a kind of a shocker, because if doctors start refusing care to their patients, it's like, people could die.
It's just the story.
No.
It's stating what's happened. It's just that
Yeah, nobody was denied care either.
its presentation might have been sort of initially sensationalized with the headline, perhaps, but
Well,
and I
let's
joked
say
about
that-
sort of grabs to it. But I mean, the actual post itself is just literally this happened at a hospital. These are the reasons, and this is what's happening, sort of thing. So I
Well,
mean,
let-
what we're sort of making of it is sort of what we want to make of it, I guess.
Well,
That's what I'm
let's say this scenario. Okay, there's a world-renowned doctor, right? And he's been to the best schools. He's literally a genius. Let's call him House, but better, right? And uh, and now
Double hands.
let's make him a Christian. And now there's a woman out there, or a person, that needs an operation. It's a very delicate operation, and this person seeks out the doctor, and he says, "I'm sorry, I can't, because I'm a Christian, and you're not living up to my standards." Whatever, she is gay or living a lifestyle he doesn't agree with, and she goes to the next person, and she dies on the operating table. It kind of, that doctor could have saved her.
Yeah, this is
But-
about prenatal care. I mean, but I mean, sure. I mean, but the point is that we're not really testing whether she would do something like that sort of thing. You know, I mean, it's clear that in a situation where she knows that she can just replace the doctor by basically not coming in, calling in sick or what have you, and she knows she's going to deal with it. In that situation, she's going to do this. But I mean, as we said, we can't be sure to know what she would do if someone had a heart attack on the street, or if even in fact it was like some sort of like emergency, like if she'd found something, like when she was doing her initial scans or something like that. I'm sure if there was an abnormality or something like that, she would have just gone with it, or directed it on more quickly, obviously. But who knows? I mean, I don't know
Well,
for sure.
I would have to read the news article first to know all the details, but I really think you guys are being way too soft on her. So
No, I
Well,
just
I
like to
could,
throw out the possibilities. Sure. I mean, she could have a callous mind. I mean, could think of all sorts of psycho, sort of pathetic ways to sort of read into it, I guess. But I mean, whether that's
well,
the way she
one
is,
one person drew the comparison that it's the same as a florist refusing to sell flowers for a same-sex wedding. Now, I, uh, I think that's ignorant and bigoted as well. But as soon as you go down this road that forces people to have to deal with other people, this is really problematic too. And I shouldn't, you know, the gay couple shouldn't be forced to do business with bigots either, or members of the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, that's just not what freedom is about. I mean, we don't want people to be bigoted and stuff, but forcing them together has not exactly proven to be a recipe for enlightenment either. That, if anything, people tend to push back when that happens. So I think sometimes if you defend freedom and people's rights, you have to you have to also sort of defend unpopular actions and things that you may personally find abhorrent. So. Yeah.
well, I would agree with the analogy with the florist. Basically, the florist is providing a service, and
Right.
if you what you guys are saying, she was only providing a service at the moment, not actually medical assistance. So in that sense, I would agree with the analogy of the florist refusing to sell flowers to a lesbian
it's
couple.
not. It's not as a. I mean, it serves as an analogy, but it's not as in practically. They're two different set of circumstances. Like a
Of course.
florist, I mean, it's just simply giving some flowers over versus, would the doctor being invested in the,
Well,
and got to do the best of their ability, that type of thing. I mean,
well,
I understand that,
no, they're both providing a service, but you could say that if the
yeah,
couple
yeah,
were in her care, and the baby had a life-threatening emergency or crisis, and then
yeah,
she all of a sudden said, you know what, I can't go on, I can't save you. Then she's in their custody, and then she would be culpable. But she
yeah,
she
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
she didn't want to be in that situation. She didn't think she could serve them as well as she could. And if anyone is providing a service, if she was a therapist, for example, if you go in for mental health issues or whatever, you go to a therapist, and that's kind of a relationship. It's more than just a service provider. So if anything, the stakes are higher where that goes. And uh, I admire. I think I can both find her personal views abhorrent and yet admire her professional ethics to the greatest. Based on the story that I read, of course, her medical ethics seem fine. That for whatever reason she couldn't give this couple the treatment that they deserve. She tried not to be there. She didn't want to ruin the moment, or she wanted to mitigate the disappointment as much as possible. So she took steps for that as well, and then she wrote a follow-up letter. I don't know if that was due to publicity or perhaps, or we can always speculate as to how they put the greatest spin on it, but I don't know. She
Yeah,
didn't
but
say I don't I refuse. You know, if you can't be in my practice or anything like that, it was just that she was bowing out to personally being involved. So
yeah, but I would need to know the details. But in this case, the patient was the child and not the parents.
well, it's a collaborative uh, effort, I think. With as I understand it, postnatal care, there has to be a rapport. I mean, you only see the doctor a small percentage of the time. It's up to the parents to implement. Uh, it's there's a lot of soft skills I think that are involved. So it seems to me like it's a collaboration between the parents and the physician, but also the child is obviously a huge the reason why they're all doing this. So the child is important, but necessary, but not sufficient. Maybe is the best way to put it.
You
You know,
know,
I think there's an argument for that. If you're involved in some frontline public service, like an A&E doctor, you probably should have to sign something that says that you would treat everyone. Or perhaps, I mean, things like the army or being a doctor or that sort of thing, something that's publicly funded anyway. But for private businesses, I think the rules could be more relaxed. I mean, I don't know. What do people think about? Let's take the florist example. Some man walks into the shop. He has a swastika on his forehead. Would you serve him?
Yeah, I don't think you should have to. I don't think anybody should have to service anybody. We're not slaves. We can turn away people with whom we don't want to deal all the time. Now, medicine
but
has a certain code of ethics, that may, that they can have their own rules, and they can ostracize people who don't who refuse treatment for whatever reason. But no, nobody should have to, deal with a Klansman if they don't want to. That's the price of being a Klansman.
oh yeah, but there's a difference between being a Klansman where you have a choice and being gay where you don't have a choice,
Right.
because at the point, I believe that you do have the right to refuse anyone service if you're a private shop. It's just like, but the kicker is you can't actually go say, get out of here, you fucking faggot or Nazi or whatever. You just can't do that. Um,
Well, it's not good business to do that, for one
at that
thing.
point, it becomes discrimination. You don't even have to give a reason. You just say, "Sorry, I can't serve you. Please leave."
Right. And another thing to think about with this particular case is, in the U.S. there are very strict privacy laws. So there's what's called HIPAA, a very strict statement. So if there were any other aspects of this case, um, uh, there were, she met with these people, and it may well be there could be, she would not be at liberty to comment about anything medical or within that sphere. She would be very legally vulnerable. So right what we have now is, all we know is this couple was lesbian and that they were refused treatment, and we don't know if there could have been some other extenuating circumstances as well that are related to the area of health or doctor-patient confidentiality. I don't know what those might be, but they are severely limited as to what you can say about a patient. That's been the case for the last roughly 15, 20 years here in the U.S.
I mean, you might be interested to know that in the UK, it is actually illegal to do that. We have
Right.
I mean, actually, it's the same across all of Europe because the UK is in the EU, so we have to do whatever Brussels tells us. But
Right.
in the UK, it would be illegal for the florist or indeed the doctor to refuse anyone's service.
I see.
But I do see a contradiction here. For instance, I mean, I see because as part of the discrimination laws, one of the things that we're not allowed to do in the UK is discriminate on the basis of religion in employment, but we're also not allowed to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation. Now, clearly there are obviously some circumstances where these two things clash, because some religions are against some sexual orientations, for example.
Right.
So these laws don't in reality work. You can find loopholes well, paradoxes in a sense. So
Well, and you have nationalized healthcare too, which, though I'm opposed to that, that would sort of preclude you're collecting taxes from indiscriminately, so you can't really discriminate in terms of how services are provided. I would think that would be the logic.
Public
I
health.
think that's a sort of good thing, really. I think public services. Sorry, go ahead.
Public health system is like the core of a good health system, basically. I mean, Canada, Australia, the UK, other parts of Europe. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand the argument.
Well, I wasn't
for
making that
privatisation.
case here, but I was saying if it is a government service, it's just like schools or anything else, then obviously the government would be called, in my view, to a higher standard as far as whom they could serve. I mean, they couldn't racially discriminate and be legitimate, in my view. So if healthcare is part of the government, then they obviously would have to be bound by more strict rules than I would assume private practices would be. So, but a private practice,
Yeah.
and I think this is a problem with nationalized healthcare anyway. But one of the lesser problems. But no, if private medicine is voluntary, then they can't be. They're not obligated to treat really anyone. It's in their interest to.
Yeah.
I would hope this, although in this case, I don't even know that the practice should really have to suffer economically. It sounds like they accommodated these people, and it was unfortunate. But
Well, another analogy is going back a little bit, because I thought of something. What if this doctor would not have been a Christian per se, but she would have been a member of the KKK and one of the lesbians would have been black? And she refused.
Well, that is a hard, abhorrent case, but I would probably think that a black woman would not want a KKK member giving her prenatal care, so I think the doctor in that case would probably be on solid footing.
KKK members aren't doctors, let's be honest.
Yeah, of course.
Well, they used to be in the 1920s, but suppose it's the only doctor in 300 miles.
Well, given some of the things the KKK did in the 20s, turning down some referring them to another doctor would be among the lesser of the things that they did, and indeed, I don't think a KKK member would provide very good natal care to someone he abhorred or he or she abhorred and didn't think had a right to live. So
yeah, but
this is sounding less like an analogy, and more like George's hypothetical situations.
But the point is, the only difference is here is the person. In one case, it's a lesbian. In the other case, it's a black person.
It's a difference in degree, not in kind.
I don't see the difference in degree. Because the black person doesn't have a choice being black, and so does the lesbian person not have a choice not being a lesbian. So it's the same thing. In my eyes, at least.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, if you're a Christian, a modern day Christian fundamentalist is going to have it's going to be less hateful towards a lesbian than a Ku Klux Klan member is going to be towards a black person. I think the degree is different, but I think the analogy is fairly nebulous, if I'm honest, because the KKK are completely irrelevant now anyway.
Yeah, it's kind of a reductio ad absurdum as far as I'm concerned. But in either case, I don't think the KKK doctor should work on somebody, should provide a service to somebody that he would obviously have a very difficult time relating to, and vice versa.
And would
I think the
produce
same
an
thing would
inferior
apply
service.
if we were to have such a ridiculous scenario. That he would, he would be putting his Hippocratic oath first if he didn't think he was suitable to serve this patient, for no matter how notorious his reasons might be.
I mean, in my country, I have a relatively easy job making a distinction here, because I could just say that that these discrimination laws should apply to all public services, and that would of course include the NHS, and then private companies maybe are allowed to discriminate, because I would have thought that letting the private companies discriminate wouldn't actually cause a lot. I mean, because they would lose business if they did. I mean, discriminating in general is bad for business, so you would have thought that there would be a sort of natural selection against it anyway. But I think my argument's relatively easy when you agree with a public health service, because you can just say everything funded by the government, as you have said. Of course, not discriminate.
If the best stuff's all the private stuff though, and they all, a lot of people, affluent people with a lot of money in the US say that more high percentage of the most wealthiest people are more religious or whatever. If they start saying, yeah, let's all make our private sort of, specialist healthcare and other things like that. And you're not provide, then there's a tiered system where, people of minorities and other, things aren't able to get the same adequate healthcare. I mean, obviously, it's going to happen anyway, because you obviously got gap wealth and can't provide that sort of care for absolutely everybody and
I've been
whatnot.
to numerous private practices in the U.S. I've never been asked about my orientation at all.
I
think
wouldn't even
this,
have a problem.
this is a obviously this is a story because it's an unusual event. If it happened every day, it wouldn't be newsworthy. It's not something you encounter in most practices.
I mean, if you think about it, there are doctors out there right now giving treatment to gay couples, and I'm pretty sure a lot of those doctors are Christian. So
I'm sure of that too. Yes.
I think this lady is just immature. And I think that she needs to grow up, and we all have to work with people we don't want to, or maybe that are a little backward. But in her case, she's the backward one, refusing to work with just people trying to live their lives.
Yeah, and that's why I said she should be fired.
She served them well by not treating them, since she has this baggage. So it was probably the best outcome.
And if she can still say, George, you think she should be fired and she shouldn't be able to practice as a doctor. Well, you're going to kill the next hundreds of patients that she was going to see, in the near future. I mean,
well, there was
another doctor.
Anyway.
Another doctor, but.
So, and I think the vast majority of us, I go to my dentist, and I frankly don't care if he's a libertarian or an anarchist, or if he's religious or not. I really want him just to fix my teeth, and
I
that's
might
what
care if he was an anarchist.
Absolutely.
I would care a little if he was an anarchist.
Well, as long as he, I do other things besides surveying their political views. When you pick a doctor in the U.S., there are all kinds of resources for picking a doctor that has a good reputation. So maybe if I found out they were, obviously if I found out he was a pedophile or something like that, I would say, ooh, I don't think I want him to be my doctor anymore. I
Still
don't care
think
if
you have to
he's.
extend. I think you have to extend, maybe not doctor, I guess, but in the case of the dentist, what does it matter? Maybe they were previously convicted pedophile, but now they're the dentist by some miracle. I mean, that doesn't happen.
Possibly, I
I
don't know.
don't think you
But
trust
I
people
mean,
without
it wouldn't
being.
really. I mean, it's sort of. I don't know. I understand. Sort of.
But
I mean,
but
the
I
idea
would
of
be
something.
like that doctor. I would say I don't think you're the best dentist for me. I can't get past that,
Yeah,
and therefore I want to see another dentist or whatever. So it goes both ways.
but yeah,
Well,
but
you have a
see, you wouldn't.
reasonable
You would disagree with her.
expectation.
That's what I mean. Like that, you disagree in the same way that she shouldn't. Well, you agree that she did the right thing, but you don't agree that she should be able to discriminate in that sense. So it's sort of like, why
Well,
should you discriminate on your dentist
I gotta speak up
because he's a
against
pedophile?
Jeff's comment because with the dentist, you have a reasonable expectation of danger. That, something might happen to you, in which there have been dentists that have sexually assaulted their patients. So, I but with this lesbian couple, there's no it's not going to hurt anyone if this doctor if this doctor treats this baby. No one will be hurt.
So I
If
actually
that's that big of a jerk off, then I'll punch his ass in the face when I get there.
I actually think her legal obligations have to do with her practice. So, I can certainly see if she were in practices in my area, which is pretty progressive, and she turned down a patient for this reason, and it was clear cut. I would think the practice would remove her. We don't need that kind of reputation, et cetera, et cetera. But um, that to me is the extent of it. I mean, I could see them letting her go if that's not the kind of practice they want, or they want to serve people. If that really and truly was the only reason why she chose not to deal with them, um, I could see where she could be fired, and that would be their choice. They don't have to have people they don't want to have working for them either. So the uh, patient doesn't have to deal with doctors they don't like. The practice doesn't have to deal with doctors they don't like, and the doctors don't have to deal with either that they don't like.
Yeah, I
So
sort of forgot that being fired meant that she could still get a job somewhere else. It's just
sure.
like I was sort of more thinking about it in the way that if the medical bullet said, buy my
Right.
license and
Yeah, I would
that would
definitely be
increase.
opposed to that.
But sure, I guess if the practice, as you said, they decided, whoa, this is not a good idea.
This is not a good fit. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all. That's all it really is.
Yeah, I can imagine because there's a huge social pressure on companies now, except for Chick Flicka, which those people are assholes. But um, I think that there's so much more pressure on doctors to. This is so big is because this is your health. If you have to go see a doctor and he refuses to treat you because he doesn't like, he thinks you're too ugly or something, that's a huge problem.
Yeah.
But the whole thing about discrimination laws, it's sort of, particularly if you're of a libertarian type bent, it's quite difficult because should people have the freedom to restrict other people's freedom? It's difficult. It's difficult to know where to go with this. I mean, I think I would be uncomfortable if the UK revoked the discrimination laws. I mean, like I say, for the UK, the discrimination laws are universal, private and public. But the thing about it is that they only do apply to certain things. So the only things you're not allowed to discriminate on the basis of are gender, race, sexual orientation, religion. I think that's about it, really. So you can discriminate on political view, for instance, and you just think, well, how far can this? How to what extent are you going to enforce these laws? Are you going to prevent any sort of discrimination at all? Well, obviously not, because in a society that's based on meritocracy, then you're going to have to discriminate on something, or presumably on the thing that you want to employ them on. But I guess you could argue that you could make it illegal to discriminate on everything that isn't related to the job. I mean, that's one thing you could do. But I can see why people would be opposed to that. I mean, for instance, the whole purpose of an interview. An interview. Whether someone's clean shaven or whether they shake your hand or whether they're just overweight, for instance. I mean, you could argue that people should not be allowed to discriminate on those factors, but we know that everyone does all the time. So I don't know. It's difficult.
Right, and when people get married, they discriminate. Most people marry members of their own race, and they discriminate on the basis of appearance and everything else. So we do discriminate to some degree, but obviously we have these other categories. I am libertarian. I think the more private stuff we have, the better morally it is, the better served people end up being in the end. I think it does punish people for being irrational. The market's a lot actually less forgiving than doctors who are protected by medical cartels and stuff like that. So, but however, when the government is involved in something, whether it's education or, in your case, nationalized health care, then yeah, they don't tax indiscriminately. So they can't discriminate on who gets the benefits or the alleged benefits of that taxation. So I would agree that for a government to racially discriminate is a different matter entirely.
Well, doesn't the government give out those medical licenses? So
yeah, see that. Well, in my perfect world, accreditation would be completely private. So a private accreditation firm could deny somebody a license, and that would affect their livelihood. We have that now with computer certification and other areas, and actually in the U.S. Government licensure is a barrier to entry and causes a lot of our problems that we have with costs here in the U.S. So yeah, it doesn't mean that there wouldn't be any kind of accreditation or anything like that, but it would be privately done rather than politically done.
Well, I gotta. That's kind of crazy, having private companies, but it license people for reasons of profit instead of being like academically knowledgeable about the human body. That's kind of crazy to have that motivation, because they could just say, "Hey, Carl the janitor, you want to be a doctor today?" It's just like,
well, then that kind of certification wouldn't be worth, like a Bob Jones license or whatever would not have any value, just like a degree from a bad school would not have any value. So actually, these
how does accreditation, like, how do they become a warranted name, I suppose?
Well, by their own reputation. So, for example, I don't know. We have contests sometimes, lotteries or whatever, and they'll say this is being overseen by the firm Deloitte and Touche, which is a big, very very highly respected and reputable accounting firm out of Michigan, and they sell their reputation, and their reputation is based on years of experience with them. So they get, when they certify stuff, that carries a lot of weight. So firms that build up their reputation and win or lose based on their reputation are actually, in our view, more likely, actually more apt to be penalized for making the wrong decisions than political entities. When political entities make bad decisions, people are rarely fired. Sometimes they even get more money. So we think private
Well,
private voluntary actions between people are not perfect, but preferable.
I gotta stop you there because governmental bodies have so many checks and balances on them, and private corporations. If you're like a big enough private corporation, you could practically tell the other corporations what they do, so they'd have everything lined up so that
You
they
have
could get the
monopolies.
best.
You have monopolies taking over. I mean, in
Yeah, well,
Australia,
not
it's like the
necessarily
big
monopoly.
corporations from overseas come over and they buy. I mean, we've got overseas investors buying up our land, putting up the price of housing and land. Also, big investors coming in and basically clogging the market and offering products for cheaper than what local producers can do. And
Well,
so you're just
Well,
left with,
that
well,
actually, when if you're in those industries, yeah, I guess it's a problem. But when people come along and offer you things, goods and services for cheaper, that makes most of us better off.
Well, my whole point before was, I mean, what if it's the biggest corporations that are doing the wrong, like we're seeing in America today? The biggest corporations are buying the politicians,
Well, that's
and
not a libertarian system. That's
well, in the
buying
case,
politicians is not the libertarians are talking about. We're talking about no, no, you don't get to pay off politicians, and you don't get to have protections against competition, which is how a lot of these firms ended up getting so big. At least the ones that aren't servicing their customers, but rather, nobody in a libertarian world is too big to fail. Nobody gets protected against uh, foreign competition, so you have to compete by meeting the needs of your customers the most effectively. And if you manage to do so, if you manage to sort of corner the market, as they say, uh, by virtue of the fact that you have uh, served your customers better than anybody possibly can, which is almost impossible without some kind of government protection. But it has happened a few times. If you do that, that is a non-coercive monopoly, and that's not a bad thing. It's a very hard thing to maintain, and even when you are number one, you are vulnerable. You have to continually stay ahead of your game and ahead of potential contributors, because the moment you start overcharging or gouging your customers, that just paves the way for startups to come in and and to clean up. That's how competition works when it's allowed to. But under the current system, yeah, it's a corporatist system. Certain large corporations are in cahoots with the government. They go in and out of the halls of power, and this is why the kinds of things that you're talking about happen. And I'm as much opposed to that as you. No matter how you feel about it, it's not free market capitalism in the sense it's not a voluntary system in that way. It's a political system, and that's what we're opposed to.
I still don't see how you can't have some regulation on an overall industry that you know affects
Uh,
the well-being of so many people.
well, the market is actually the most is in that sense the strictest regulator, because it's a profit and loss system. So if you don't serve your customers, you go out of business unless you have protection from the government, as so many of these too big to fails did have. They were political players before they were economic players, and that's why General Motors is still here chugging along, and all of these companies in a free market system, they would have either had to reorganize or go out sell off their assets to somebody who could make better use of them.
Hmm. I don't. It seems like you don't have any trust in the governmental system. I don't have any trust in the corporate system to self-regulate. I don't.
Well,
I mean, my view is that the free market is, as Jeff says, it is the most powerful regulating force. But I think it is ultimately naive to think that you can do without any government at all. I mean, I think there's a happy medium. I would let free trade go as far as it is feasible while still maintaining a relatively small government. But I don't think anarchy is in any way feasible. But and I do agree with things like the National Health Service. And you can still have a good, strong free market and an appropriate level of taxation that benefits everyone. So I think you can have the best of both worlds here. You can have a good capitalist system, but you can also have a welfare state.
Healthcare, education, particularly. If those two things are covered by a government, I don't care. Everything else can be as free as you want. Free marketplace, go nuts, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can take the best parts of socialism and the best parts of anarchism, and you put them together, and you get something that really works well. I don't think either extreme is doing anyone any favors. I mean, one of the reasons that very high taxation doesn't work is because it reduces incentive, and then you end up actually getting less. So if for instance you raise the taxation level to 100%, you're getting 100% of zero, because no one would do any extra.
No incentive to work.
Yeah, exactly. But you don't want it to be zero either, because then you're getting no taxation. So there's an optimum level of taxation somewhere between 0 and 100%, and it's probably closer to 0 than it is to 100. But there's optimum level of taxation which benefits everyone the most, and by everyone I mean it benefits people of all wealths equally well. Well, not equally well, but it benefits everyone across the spectrum, and I think that this sort of optimum type. I mean, clearly this is a society that is far more capitalist than communist, but ultimately it would still have a welfare. It wouldn't be completely anarchist either.
Well, first of all, anybody who wants government to be less than what it is today is a kindred spirit of mine. We can always haggle over the the last few crumbs, but I would still hold when you take a huge amount of money out of the productive sector and you put it in the political sector. Things are solved based on politics, not on real demonstration of what people's wants and needs are. So, for example, if I buy something, I've foregone some other alternative, some other thing that I could have also bought. When somebody takes something from me, taxes, I haven't really expressed a need for something. They've forcibly taken it from me, and certain people have decided what I may or may not need. So I think there's a huge information problem, among other things, when you take wealth out of the voluntary market and you put it into the coercive market. So we talk about schools, but here in the U.S., in some places, if you're poor, it actually hurts people a lot more, because if you're poor and you don't have the resources to even drive your kids to a better government school, you're stuck with a school in your own neighborhood, and if that school is a de facto jail, like many in the inner cities are, that's a huge penalty, and that doesn't make anybody better off. They can drive to get a better pizza or buy a better car or a better computer, but they can't leave the neighborhood. So I actually think education is very important, and I think markets are much better in providing essential goods and services, just as they are providing so-called unessential goods and services. So that's why it's I think education is actually too important to trust the government with, and I feel the same way about healthcare. But that's just.
So you would have never had net neutrality then?
No, absolutely not.
See, that's kind of backwards, because if it wasn't for net neutrality, they would hike up costs, and we were already starting to see the effects of that before Title II. They made it a Title II utility.
Well, now everybody will see. It's a. I know they've made it a utility, which is in my view a really terrible idea. Now, rather than Netflix and the big providers who use more resources, they pay the same as everybody else. So what you're probably going to have, among other things, is you're going to have shortages. Why shouldn't they pay if they use more? Why shouldn't they have to pay Comcast or whatever? Now, then there's the problem of local monopolies, which we're opposed to as well. But even so, if it's a shopping mall and Macy's has this humongous store, why shouldn't they pay more rent than the Sunglasses Hut, or whatever?
I don't think you know how the internet works. You do understand that these companies have their website on a server, which is sort of generating bandwidth,
Sure.
its own sort of bandwidth, and the
Mm-hmm.
internet companies are the cable companies which you use to connect to that,
Right.
and they can. It really doesn't matter how they don't really use up bandwidth. These companies, they are just connected to it, and you're using the bandwidth connecting to their sites. Um, there's not that there's not they're not paying them for so they can suck up bandwidth. They're just connected to the servers.
Right. You're right. I don't understand every aspect of the technical parts of it, but the principle that people who use more of a resource, that whatever along the way, whoever has to pick up the tab for that, they should be allowed to charge more for it, or to offer a fast lane, or any number of technical solutions. And getting the government involved in the internet, which is actually the biggest free speech zone the world has ever seen, is problematic on that front as well. But no, this stifles technology. But even if it didn't do all those things, it would. There's no reason why somebody who uses more resources can't pay more than somebody else, or shouldn't. That's.
No, I don't think you understood what I said. You can pay more for more bandwidth. Everyone can do
Right.
that. They do have this cap. What they're saying is, you can't slow people down that are connected to this competitor website just because this other corporate guy. That's a way of crushing competition. It's like, that we have anti-monopoly laws for this, and we need to, update those laws. So, but
Well, that's up to consumer demand, though. So if consumers want to have all this content, then the providers are beholden to them as well. So, but my understanding of it, this is
I'm not sure.
something that resources get allocated spontaneously all the time, and so. However it works out, and it's not static. How it works 10 years from now may be entirely different. Although the more you regulate it, the harder it is to innovate. So I don't think this was called for, and I don't see why an internet service provider has to have the same. In principle, has to. That everybody pays the same. That Netflix gets a free ride, and the smaller companies. Well, I know they don't. I know they don't pay directly, but if you use more resources, it's legitimate to have to pay somebody for them.
I would say in terms of the I mean, I would agree, like the education system, the public education system in the US obviously has a lot of flaws, but I mean, obviously if you streamline the government to which it was only taking care of, maybe just education and health, it would be
How about police,
a bit
courts?
different. I mean,
I guess
different than what it is currently over there now, perhaps. But I mean, who knows? I mean, it's hard when it's such a large population and such a long history as well.
I would argue the bigger the population, the less practical central planning is. It's hard to plan one's own life, or for me to even decide what I should and shouldn't eat or do or know about or learn. The
Jeff,
idea.
I have a question because a few minutes back, I'm not sure if I heard it correctly, but did you basically say that you didn't want the government in control of the education system?
Correct. I think education would be much better if it were private.
So who would determine what the difficult word for me in English, the curriculum is? Because that would basically mean then
Consumers.
yeah, but then you run the risk in, for example, in Christian areas, that they would start banning evolution teaching in the classroom and things like that.
That would be unfortunate, but yeah. But you should have the right to send your children to a school that teaches evolution. If my neighbors are religious, they're their parents. They should send their kid to. If they don't teach evolution, that's too bad. And then may the best school win.
So
that's a
so you
major
would,
problem
that's not
because
fair.
that isn't going to be available in every area, and that's why we regulate this stuff so everyone has a fair and balanced sort of education, so everyone is sort of has the same level of education.
Well, that's
Or at
not the
least we
case in
try
the
to.
U.S. It's not
At least
fair
we
at all.
try to, but if you privatize it, only the rich are going to get the best, the best basic education.
Well, that's currently the current state of affairs. So if you live in a really good neighborhood, you'll have a halfway decent public school, or you can go to private schools. If you live in a really bad neighborhood, you're stuck with a warehouse.
yeah, but the point is it would get even worse when you start saying to the people, well, you pay for the school, now you tell the kids what they should be taught. Because the moment you start taking science classes out of the classroom, you have a serious problem in 10, 20 years with your economy, because you basically would have a stupid populace that can't do any technical job.
Well, people who about 40% of the population of Detroit can't fill out a basic job application, and most of them went up through the Detroit school system. Most of them have diplomas, and they can't do these very basic things. So we have a lot of stupid people now.
But
I can't imagine that it would be worse under a private system.
That's a problem, perhaps because of how it is now regulated, but it should only tell you that you should have more regulation.
It's hyper-regulated. Detroit is one of the most progressive cities in the world. That's part of why it's in such dire straits.
Yeah, but Jeff, I think the thing is though, if you let the free market exist in a system that's where we still have a welfare state, everyone benefits from free trading and. So without things like taxation, I think that certain people will be disadvantaged. So could you not concede that there is at least a level of socialism that is useful? I actually do lean towards libertarianism, but I acknowledge that it's a useful force for good when combined with a welfare state as well. I think you do need some regulation. As long as you keep it.
Everybody I talk about these things, and I really believe this. Everybody I talk to says, "What about the poor? What about the poor? What about this and that?" I think that's a really good indication that people care about those things. And if anything, if they have more resources under a libertarian free market, the people would tend to also be even more charitable than they are now. People in the U.S.
Comcast gives a shit about their customers. Do you honestly think Comcast gives us shit about the customers?
No, but Comcast is a government monopoly in most areas. Here, it's illegal to compete with Comcast, so no, they act in a government-like manner.
Charity is a stupid American excuse for promoting individualism, because we do a lot of charity here in the Netherlands too. But we have a government that regulates our school systems and our medical professions and all, and it works perfectly here. Huh? But what you see in the United States, all those charities events and for hospital there, that is only because you have too few regulation in your nation. So you need to have that Otherwise, you self-destruct your nation.
Well, I don't know who told you that there was no regulation in the hospitals here. Over half of the number of dollars in the U.S. that are spent on medicine are spent by the government here, and it's mostly third-party pay. There's mandated benefits. There's all kinds of things. We have as many regulations as anyone. It's still somewhat private, which is why a lot of people still like to come here for certain kinds of specialized care, at least. Um, so, so no, it's not a private system here, and my argument would be, to the extent that it's not private, that's why prices go up. Otherwise, in other industries, there's downward pressure on prices. Things in absolute dollars get cheaper over time. Cars, stereos, anything. It becomes, people find more, if competition drives prices down, people become more efficient. It creates those incentives. But now we've had the tax code since World War II has favored employees paying for health insurance, which binds people to work for somebody because the employer can get their insurance tax free, whereas you have to pay post-tax dollars for insurance. That drives the demand way up, and that's what drives prices up here in the U.S. So we need less government in healthcare here in the U.S., not more.
Well, I've heard stories. I think that was in the document. The guy that also made Columbine. What's his name?
Michael Moore. Yeah.
Michael. He also did
one on healthcare.
Few years, yeah, on healthcare. And it's been a few years when I saw it. But there was an example, I think, in the documentary of a guy that had a car accident, and because there was no Obamacare at that time. He basically had to sell his house and all his goods to pay their medical bill.
Yeah,
that's
really, again, the prices, of course, have spiraled, but it's not because people can't just charge what they want to unless they have some kind of protection from government. In this case, they have third-party pay, which takes the consumer out of the buying decision. So medicine doesn't have to compete on the basis of price here. And that's why the prices are so high. So he's half right. He identifies the problem, but not the solution. And so, like doctors say, if you don't know what the disease is, you're not going to come up with the right cure. Well, the disease is too much government intervention, not too little.
Well, opinions differ, of course.
Of course.
I think the thing with all this, though, is that you do have some very good points here, but I think these are more relevant to arguing against a country that's very socialist, like the UK was in the 1970s. Like we were before Thatcher came about. But and I agree with that. It was pretty damn awful back then. But at the same time, that doesn't mean we should go in the other direction to the extreme. There is a case for the best of both worlds here, and I don't think any extreme point of view is likely to be the best one for everyone. I think, like I say, I am right leaning, so I do agree with a lot of libertarian type thinking, but I think it's naive to think that we should have no government at all, or a government that has basically no control, or even a very small government. I think we still do need one, and a nationalised health service I do think is particularly a good idea, and it can benefit from some level of privatisation, but I don't think we have to go all the way. What I'm getting is the impression that a lot of your arguments are very good arguments, but I don't think they're good arguments for having a pure anarcho-capitalist type system. I think they're very good arguments against having a more socialist system.
Okay, well, I'm sorry I'm going to have to cut this short because my dinner is ready. It's dinner time here in the East Coast of the U.S. But anyway, no, this has been a good conversation. I appreciate the questions, and I hope you'll have me on again sometime. But I'm going to have to leave.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks being here.
Yeah, it was fun. Nice meeting you all.
It's nice getting some disagreement for once, actually, because it can.
Yeah, I bring drama to hangouts. So anytime you want to have a little bit of you want to have a foil in the room, I'll gladly play the part. So take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Yeah, that was a change. Huh?
I think I do quite like it when people come in and don't always. I think it can get very boring if we all agree with each other all the time on everything. So it's good to have some level of disagreement.
Well, there was a point earlier. I don't know what the question exactly was. About freedom of religion. What was the point? Well, basically, I'm not as an atheist for freedom of religion because I think religion should be disbanded. So I also do not think that governments should protect religious freedom.
So you're actually against secularism?
Well, that's the point because I have a little bit of a double standard because I think it works for now, but I think in some future case it should stop. But I'm not sure yet at which point that should happen.
I mean, enforced atheism doesn't exactly have a good record, though, does it? I mean, if we look at the countries where it did exist, we have we have the Soviet Union and we have North Korea. I mean, it has barely a better record than religion does.
Well, North Korea would be a bad example because basically they have a state religion in which the supreme leader is God. But I'm not talking about forced religion. Basically, my proposal would be that you build your education system up and you teach people in such a way that people would veer away from religion, and that's a long-term project that would probably take a few hundred years. I'm not for forcing religion out, but I would be extremely for totally not promoting it. So that's a little slight difference.
I'd like to say I'm not against religion. I'm just against organized religion. I think that should be illegal. I think humanity is not responsible with organized religion, and there's more than enough evidence to prove that.
I mean, I think. I mean, I don't think these ideas are anti-secularist, to be honest. I mean, the wanting to have some science education that's free of religious indoctrination. That's not anti-secularist. Anti-secularist would be trying to stop people from actually being religious or trying to make any sort of religion legal. I mean, this authoritarian type thinking, I think, is no better than theocracy. For instance, a few years ago, France actually banned people from wearing the burqa in public, and that's something I disagree with.
It's something I agree with. So.
Well, I can see why you would argue it because I don't particularly like it, but I don't think you can go. It sets a precedent. It sets an unsavory precedent doing that sort of thing. I don't think you can ban religious choice. I mean, you could argue that it isn't choice. Like you could go that way, but you can't just outright ban something.
The point is it can be misused, and there was an example. I think this week it was in Australia. A court case in which a woman was held up by a police officer, and she didn't know he had a camera in his car, but she was fully clothed with in the niqab and all. I don't know the exact face covering and everything, and she got penalized. I don't recall for what exactly, but she wasn't happy with it. So she filed a complaint against the officer of discrimination because she said he pulled her over because she was a Muslim. And he insulted her and he tried to pull off her head cover and all things like that. And of course, that was not the case, and there was a camera filming the whole incident. So, of course, she failed in court. But even funny, even in court, she claimed that the woman that was visible in the video was not her, but it was her twin sister. So, well, it's a little bit, it's an odd example maybe, but that's an example why I would say no head covers.
Well,
And
this sort. I mean, this sort of comes back to what we were talking about earlier with the ability for companies to be able to discriminate, because I think you can make a very strong argument that a company can have a dress code that everyone is expected to follow, and if someone doesn't follow the dress code because of their religion, then the company should not be expected to accommodate. I can fully agree with that. I can also fully agree with perhaps the need for not wanting to have a teacher that's wearing something like a niqab. But I don't think any of this excuses the outright banning of actually wearing it in public. Because I mean, what could possibly be?
The point is also that in niqab is not a religious garment. It's nowhere in the Quran it is written that a woman should be fully covered. And Aaron Ra did a video in one of his podcasts. I think it's the last podcast in which he interviewed a woman which had to flee. I think she came from. I think she came from Kuwait, and she had to flee because of marital reasons, etc. But in that podcast, she explained where it came from. Because when you look in the 1920s Kuwait, she said no women were wearing no cover, and they're showing their faces, and etc. etc. Historically, the wearing of the niqab. Women started wearing a head covering to make the distinction between women in their society that were enslaved and women who were not enslaved. So basically, the Muslim soldiers could see, oh, that woman is one of ours because she has her head covered, and that woman is not covered, so she's a slave, so we can rape her. That's the reason why women started wearing head covering in Islam, so they could make the distinction between the enslaved women and the Muslim women. That's the reason, and over time it's changed, and it changed. So basically, it's a cultural thing, and not an Islamic thing. So the excuse that women need to wear the niqab because of religion is utterly bullshit, basically.
Yeah, but it's not so much the need to wear it. It's a freedom of choice to wear it. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are bullshit. I mean, people with dog covers. I mean, that doesn't do the dog any good. But it doesn't mean that people should be banned from doing that. There are lots of ridiculous things that people wear all the time. I don't think you can legislate on what people should wear just because it's ridiculous.
But it's not, because in some countries it's illegal to have your head covered for non-religious reasons. Because if I have a full head cover and I walk into a bank, well, probably they press the alarm button.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's different though, because you could make a very solid argument for why. I mean, that would be the same for like wearing a Mickey Mouse costume. I mean, you could make an argument for, like, I don't know, for a passport or something. You've got to be able to see the eyes. You've got to be able to see all the facial features for purposes of identification, that sort of thing. Yeah, I fully understand that because there's a reason for it. But what I don't think is acceptable is banning French women from wearing the niqab or the hijab in the street, because there's no justification for that. There's no actual reason. I mean, it's not.
Well, there are still counties in America that have ordinances and laws in place where you can't wear, a mask in public. I think it's that stems back from the old Wild West days when bank robbers and everything would go around and wear masks. But I think there's I don't know that it's so much of a uh, if it I mean it might be a logistical problem is whereas someone does something wrong they were wearing a burqa were they a woman or a man who were they um, I think this I think it's probably a good thing that they can't wear burqas in public, you know, um, in France because it just you know it could lead to all sorts of problems that that aren't good.
Uh, you have to have some sort of consistency here, though, because if people are not allowed to wear things that cover their face just because it's the law, everyone has to be able to be easily identified, that sort of thing. You can make up some sort of reason for that's not arbitrary. Then fine. The burqa would come under that, but it would only come under that incidentally. What I don't think you can do is you can specifically single out the burqa, but other forms of head covering, I don't know, for example, a Mickey Mouse costume, or even some teenagers cosplaying.
Well, there have been people that went into a bank to rob the bank in costumes, so there may be a legal reason for that too.
Well, you could argue that someone could go into a bank wearing a gorilla costume. I mean, I mean, all I'm saying is that I don't think. I mean, in the case of this French law, I think it's clear that it's singling these particular headgear out. It's not. I mean, for instance, the turban isn't banned as far as I'm aware. It isn't a point of banning headdresses because you can't see people's facial features, which I think you can make an argument for that, but I don't think you should single out any particular religion. I mean, again, it contravenes freedom of religion, and I know you said that you were against that in some circumstances, but I guess we differ on that.
Well,
I'm not against religion. I'm against organized religion. It's like um, I think it's misused, and I don't think they should hold any buildings or anything like that. Or yeah, you want to believe it, fine, but you can't organize around it. You can't uh, have these big mega churches like that because I think it's very corruptive to a society.
Yes, but forcing people to not be religious is equally as corruptive, and also it often doesn't work. You can't force people to not be religious. But the best way to reduce religiosity is actually the converse. You want a society to be as secular, and I guess as liberal. I don't like using that word because it has loads of connotations. But you want a society to be as free as possible. People can be able to practice whatever religion they like, and it's in these sorts of societies that you tend to actually have reduced religiosity. I mean, there is a correlation between atheism and secularism. There's a pretty good positive correlation between those two things, and I think there's pretty good reason that it's actually causal. It's not just a correlation there.
yeah, but example, look at the Netherlands. The curriculum is what should be taught to children is written by the government. Basically, they have an organization for that. It is, and you have basically all schools here fall under the rulings of our government Department for Schooling. I don't know how to say it in English. So all the regulation, what a kid should be taught each year from age 5 to 14, 20 years old is top down provided by the government. But that still doesn't exclude uh, some schools, because you also have Protestant schools and Catholic schools, from teaching other things like Bible teachings and such. But I personally do not agree with that. I basically say no Protestant school, no Catholic schools. If you want to teach your kids religion, do it at home. And I know it's a problematic, and a lot of people disagree with it. But I really think that education should be 100% secular. Religion has got nothing to do in the classroom. And if you want to raise your kids' religion, well, do it at home. Do it like they did in the old days, or in Sunday school, and things like that. Why would I, as an atheist, pay for the education, for religious education, when I don't agree with the religion?
I mean, I kind of agree with that. I don't disagree with what you're saying there.
Yeah, but that's basically what I mean. But that I would prefer the state not promoting religion. But the moment you take religion into the classroom, then you, as a taxpayer, are paying for the religious education of other people. And we have private schools here, but even those schools fall under certain regulations. So.
I think this is why there's still a good argument for some sort of statism, and not an all-out libertarian type system like Jeff was implying. I you know I mean I think it's very difficult to say, but one thing you can do is you can look at the countries that exist today, that are the most successful, the most sort of developed and free, as it were, and you can see sort of the political systems they have, and it tends to be Western Europe, North America, Australia, those sorts of places, and you can look at the political systems they have, and they all tend to be fairly similar. And most of these systems have, do have a welfare state, but they also, at least to a certain degree, do encourage things like free trade.
Well, I'd like to say here in America, our schools are being under attack by Christianity. They're wanting to not only insert creationism, but they're wanting to take away things like science and social studies. I don't know if you've heard the thing about Colorado. They're trying to do sneaky backdoor tricks just to get rid of some things that they don't like. I think that's bullshit.
Yeah, but that's why I asked the question, how what he thought about the who should pay for the education system. Because the moment you say the government does not pay for the education system, you basically say, well, people, you pay for the education system, so you determine the curriculum. And then you get the odd things that in certain areas where there are a lot of churches and religious people.
And
that
I think that education should be state funded. I mean, I'm in favour of a state funded education system.
But yeah, we go back to the fucking Stone Age. If we didn't have state-funded education, it'd be fucking Mormons up in here.
Yeah, they already. I think the guy, the political guy from the USA that did the whole climate change thing. What's his name? He was a presidential candidate at some point.
Al Gore.
Yeah, yeah. Al Gore said already about 10 years ago that if if you take out if you put religion as it is in the education system, and you take out science classes and all that thing, that in 20, 25, 30 years you have a serious problem, because you have an uneducated populace which is incapable to do the difficult technical jobs, and you will have to get in people from foreign nations who are educated on it. So you're only creating problems the moment you start to do that. So I'm not for banning churches all of a sudden and banning everything religious, I understand it's a slow process because what you said, the nations which are doing well, the Western nations, it didn't came overnight. It took hundreds of years for us to change.
Yeah.
I just wonder how much better we could do if we got rid of just the organized religion. You know, all the all of the money not being sent to these televangelists and these organizations that do nothing but just take money. They don't give it. They only use it to spread their bullshit, and they don't use that money for anything except putting it back into their corporation. Because
I mean, I think there is optimism here because I think in basically all Western countries there is a trend that religiosity is decreasing. I mean the US is basically the most religious first world country in the world. I mean, there's no country more religious than the US in the first world. But even the US is the prevalence of religion is actually going down, and in parts of Europe it's really going down. So I think there's definitely reason to be optimistic here. I think there's a real good chance that, in a few decades' time, we could, atheism will become definitely a major player on a national stage. I mean, I know internationally atheism is pretty big, but even on a national scale, in a few decades it will. I mean, I think the places that are perhaps a little bit less optimistic about are the third world countries, or places like Africa and I guess the Middle East, of course, and places that I mean, things like India and China. It's very difficult to know what's going to happen with India and China because they're sort of newly developing type countries. So we could expect a lot from Asia. But it's difficult to know. I mean, China could be really interesting because I think it's worth keeping an eye on what happens to China. In 30 or 40 years, China could be a democracy. So I think it's worth keeping an eye on, really.
well,
Yeah.
I do know that the non-religious part of the country is growing because they're sick of the intolerance and the hate and the absolute total batshit insane concepts. So
Well, I think there's an interesting difference between China and Africa. In China, I read an article this week, and I don't recall all the details because of my bad memory. But in the parliament in China, I don't know what the official word is for the parliament in China, but let's call it the parliament in China. There are about 1,000 people there. I think it's very big. And they're all member of the Communist Party, of course. But you have people there in the Chinese Parliament. One who sweeps the streets for a living, so he makes about $200, let's say, a month. But you also got billionaires there, so that's a very odd system when you think of it. It's one Communist Party, and they all have the same political power, basically. But you have guys that have a net worth of several billion, and you have a guy sitting next to that who makes $200 a month sweeping the streets. It's a very odd system, but
I mean, I think this is because I think China is odd because China is a hybrid country, really. It's sort of in between one thing and the other. It's not really anything. It's not really one or the. I mean, China's odd because it has a communist political system but a capitalist market. You can kind of see China as being in the transition stages from a dictatorship to a democracy. It's sort of halfway. It's not there. But I mean, the reason that China is interesting is because it might well become a democracy. I think there's optimism here that China could.
Well, I wouldn't say that they're halfway. I think they have a much more longer way to go. Perhaps they're at 10%. The only reason they adopted a market system is, of course, to help their own economy. But compare that to the African countries. I think in Africa, I'm not up to speed on all the politics, and you have a lot of countries in Africa, of course, but the stories that do come out is that there is a problem in Africa that you have a lot of poor people, and you have a very small percentage that basically make all the money, and you have a very not so big middle class, and I think that's still a very big problem. And one of the problems, of course, there is education, and I really think that's something that should be much more be promoted and put effort in to in education in the Africa in Africa to help elevate the poor people so that they can get better jobs and things like that. Because now all the money goes to the political powerful few control all the power and all the money in a lot of African countries, and I really think that's a problem. So we're not done with Africa yet. I think China is going in the right direction, even though it is a communist nation, because I'm not very favorable of communism. But in Africa, I really think there is still a lot of problems,
Oh yeah, ever since the freaking Christians went down there, fucking cunts.
yeah, because you get those oddities like the witch burnings, and I don't know if you ever saw that. They had people, they were beating people, and they threw straw at them and they set them on fire, basically because they thought they were witches. And
Yeah, and there's like preachers telling people to eat grass and they do it. Like,
yeah, I saw that too. Yeah, that's ridiculous. And the same guy, a few months later, Ramboni Ministries, I think it was. The same guy let his people, let his the people in his church think he turned gasoline into some kind of beverage, not exactly water, but and he made people drink it, and it still had basically gasoline in it because it was gasoline with sugar and some soda, and he let people drink it. That's horrible, and people believe it. Uh, those kind of things, basically because they are uneducated, they do not know any better, and they are being indoctrinated. So
I wouldn't lose hope here completely though, because I mean you can get fairly quick transitions. I mean look at Spain. I mean King Quantos, Spanish king of who abdicated essentially, and basically he did a good job of bringing democracy to Spain. So I mean I mean, I guess one person can make a difference in some cases. I mean, for Africa, I don't really think it's going to happen anytime soon. But I certainly think. I mean, I mean, at this stage, Africa and the Middle East are the big problem areas. I mean, there's just very little that can be done there. I mean, South Africa is probably going in the right direction, but most of the rest of Africa is pretty. It's pretty difficult to know what to do. But I mean, even despite all this, it is still going in the right direction. I mean, most African countries are less poor than they were 20, 30 years ago.
sure,
But I mean, this is one of the reasons I'm in favour of things like the free market, because it does a fantastic job of modernising a country. I mean, like China, for instance. I mean, all the progress that China is making can be is basically caused by the transition to a capitalist-based market system. So I mean, it does a lot of good there. As for the Middle East, I don't really think anyone really knows what's going to happen to the Middle East. I mean, there's some hope. I mean, the Kurdish resistance is doing quite a good job, and the Kurds are very sort of. I mean, they're quite patriotic, so they put their sort of nationality and their culture before their religion. And there's never going to be a Kurdistan, but there's some hope there, I think, and I think they've done a good job.
Yeah, that's kind of stupid because basically a lot of the problems you see in the Middle East and in Africa were caused by the aftermath of European colonialism after World War II. One, I think it was when they draw the maps and they started drawing all those straight lines right through tribes and putting tribes next to each other in one country that have been enemies for centuries. So yeah, that causes conflicts. And I don't recall the guy that came up with it, but basically the carving up uh, of Turkey after World War I, making it Turkey and not realizing that the Kurds were basically an independent uh, people for centuries, and now they live in 3, 4 countries. That of course that causes conflicts. Uh, yeah, the guy that did that 100 years ago is really causing a lot of problems after his death. So.
I don't think there was really a very good way. I mean, I think whichever way you went about it, things weren't ever going to be good. I mean, the irony, of course, is that the British Empire. I mean, a lot of these countries were better off under the British Empire than they are now. But what else were you supposed to do? I mean, the British Empire, of course, couldn't last forever, and it shouldn't have done. But wherever you drew these borders, there were going to be problems. I mean, I don't think there was any magic bullet here that could have solved all of this. I think it was basically inevitable, just the way that these things worked out. Um, I, I think there is a reasonable amount of hope. There's actually this report. I think it's done by the United Nations. And it's a report on disasters and risks. And then, interestingly, it gives a 19% chance that we'll wipe ourselves out before 2100, which, when you think about it, is probably not that unreasonable. I mean, we've come pretty close to Armageddon many times before, so I can well believe that. I mean, in 10 years' time, people will be able to print their own Ebola viruses, for example. I mean, with this, 3D printing is pretty terrifying when you think about it. People will eventually be able to print viruses. So, I mean, you can imagine that it would.
That's funny. I mean, when people talk about printing viruses, that you would need a printer that can manipulate genes on a microscopic level.
And
That
actually, this technology actually already exists. I mean, it's nowhere. Obviously it's not viable, but in theory, you could even do it today. I mean, it would probably take you several years to do it, but you could. Um, so the technology actually does exist, even today. So it's pretty terrifying to think that in a decade or so, any guy in his garage could do it.
I've never heard of that, printing viruses.
I mean, we know. I mean, for instance, we've fully sequenced the genome of the Ebola virus. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, it probably wouldn't be feasible to do it.
well,
It would take.
there's another problem. It's the fact that even if you did 3D print the Ebola virus, there's no guarantee it would act in the same way. There's no guarantee. It might even become an cure for Ebola. So
Well, of course, yes, but I mean, it's still. The point is that the very early stages of this technology exists today. You can imagine that 10, 20 years down the line, this could become feasible. So the idea that there's a 19% chance that we're going to make ourselves extinct by the year 2100 is probably not that far fetched.
I
Well,
don't think that technology will be feasible. Maybe within 100 years, it'll be
You,
feasible.
you don't think it'll be feasible in 100? I mean, I think it'll be feasible in 20 years. I
I
mean,
think it's a good idea because suppose we go live on Mars, you need technologies like that. So I'll say invent it.
the problem
Well,
is the
the
problem is
problem with that technology, it would take a very, very long time to produce materials at the microscopic level. I mean, you might get a inch long carbon tube in a year, or and that's just a very simple carbon in tube. The level of complexity we're dealing with is astronomical.
I think you underestimate how far we've come. I mean, if you just take an iPhone, how many transistors do you think are in an iPhone? How small do you think these electronic components are in just a normal iPhone? I mean, I think there are billions of transistors in an iPhone. They're too small for the naked eye to see. This sort of micro technology already exists today, and it's already being sold today. The printers that we currently have can print on scales that are, nearly nanoelectronics. The sort of semiconductor industry is definitely getting that way. So this is really not far-fetched. I think we're a lot closer than you think we are to this. And the problem with all this is that obviously this is going to happen eventually, and technology is going to improve. But as technology improves, the risk of it being abused increases as well. So the sort of the odds that you're playing against, you become increasingly vulnerable. Honestly, I think that I think a 1 in 5 chance that we'll be extinct by 2100. I think that's very reasonable. Think of nuclear weapons for a start. They're going to become easier and easier to make, and as the technology becomes more and more known, it's only going to take one mistake. We're vulnerable to all these mistakes. There's a certain amount of personal responsibility that is going to have to exist, and it only takes one person that has cancer and has nothing to lose to just do something that can potentially wipe out the human race. And I think this is the biggest threat to our civilization as we know it is our technology, because it's developing at a scary rate. Think about when I was at school, and it wasn't that long ago. It was let's say when I was in primary school, a couple of decades ago. I still remember writing on a chalkboard. We had mobile phones back then, but they were the size of a brick. Look what we have now. It's just insane. Even in the last 10 years, look at how far technology has come. I think we should be terrified of what the future holds.
Well, that's the thing with technology. We kind of almost reached a plateau, and it's going to take several years to get over that plateau. Because there's only so much we can do with our current knowledge, and we can do a lot of good things with the technology we have. That's true, but the technology you're talking about, that's more than 50 years away. Probably maybe 200 years.
I would disagree. I think it's a lot closer than you think.
Well, but 5 decades ago, they basically said the same thing about technologies we use now every day. So I know you always need to be careful, but I think you're overreacting. We'll just see. Perhaps we'll be dead in 30 years. So
it's notoriously difficult to predict. If you look at for instance, the original Star Trek series and how it envisioned the future to be. It underestimated a lot of things. For instance, the electronics industry was always underestimated. They had people on starships with mobile phones, huge headsets. These things have always been underestimated. Now we have touch screens and holograms, but at the same time, of course, we don't have starships. We don't have nuclear fusion. And of course, nuclear fusion was supposed to be cracked by the 80s, and it still doesn't exist. So, but in terms of the electronics industry and basically anything that's small, essentially, it's always been underestimated. And oddly enough, the macroscopic things have tended to be overestimated. For instance, we landed on the moon and then we never looked back. I mean, for instance, these missions to Mars, I'm skeptical that they will ever happen. Since
Well, they're going back to the moon because there are private organizations that want to go back to the moon because helium-free, I don't know what's it called. There's something on the moon that has a potential for providing clean nuclear energy. I'm
well,
not.
I don't think that we should fuck with the moon because the less gravitational density it has, the more it screws up our tides. Um, that could be an extinction event for us, but um, uh, yeah, it could be very bad.
It's helium-free, I think it is. I looked it up. There's a lot of helium-free on the moon, and the reason why it's on the moon and not on the Earth is because it's basically produced by the sun, but it doesn't arrive on Earth because we are protected by our atmosphere, and the moon isn't. So there's a lot of helium-free on the moon, and helium-free has a potential for providing clean energy, basically. So that's why private organizations are looking at the moon again and wanted to go back. So.
I mean, but this technology that you're suggesting, I mean, this is an example of technology that currently doesn't exist. I mean, this is something that may exist in the future. I mean, fusion is an interesting one because I mean, there's a saying with fusion: it's always 10 years away. It's been 10 years away for the last 40, 50 years. We just don't know. But by contrary, things like computer power, the electronics industry, semiconductors, that sort of thing, that has always been underestimated. It's always exploded much faster than we ever thought it would. I mean, Moore's law is incredible. The fact that computing power doubles every 18 months. I mean, there's almost no doubt that the machine that you're using now is completely redundant.
Yeah, I still remember the first microwave oven. So.
Well, yeah.
When I was young, we didn't have one, so that was basically a magical device the moment we got one. So.
Yeah, well, we're still going to be at that plateau, and I think it's going to take us several years to get off that plateau and start moving forward because, we're kind of at the limits with what we can do with the knowledge that we have.
Well, I know at least that the Large Hadron Collider started up again this week, so we know what they will discover and what new technologies could sparkle up from that. So the next few decades are going to be exciting, I think. And I wouldn't mind to have a Star Trek food processor in my house. So I'll just say a cup of coffee, I'll just say tea, Earl Grey hot, and I'll get my nice cup of tea straight out of the wall.
Sure, we'll assemble that. It'll take about 200 years.
Ebola, highly infectious, kills 99% of the population. I mean, what happens if someone ordered that from the food replicator? I mean, these Star Trek societies. I mean, did they ever consider what would? I mean, these food replicators, they're terrifying. I wouldn't want one. You could make anything with them. You could make weapons. You can make anything.
Yeah, I recall an episode in which one of the, I think it was in Deep Space Nine, one of the food processors was rigged to produce
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And it turned out it was an old terrorist attempt by the Bajorans who wanted to basically take out all the Kardashians on Deep Space Nine. So.
I always thought the Bajorans were a nasty race of people. If it were not for the fact that they were oppressed by an even nastier civilization.
Yeah, they from what I gather, their culture before was kind of communist. That they had a caste system in which you could, if you were a painter and you had a son, he was a painter.
Yeah, I never liked the Bajorans either, but basically that's because I'm an atheist and all the Bajorans are very religious, so that's the reason I never liked them. So.
I mean, there
Well,
was.
yeah, they worship.
I think there was this alternate reality because Star Trek did these all the time. But there was this alternate reality episodes where the Cardassians never existed and the Bajorans were in control, and the Bajorans were worse than the
No,
Cardassians.
it was different. They traveled through the wormhole, but because of a defect in the engine, and that interacted with the wormhole, they ended up in an alternate universe, in which the humans, Star Trek of the
Yeah, the
Star Trek.
original.
Yeah, the original Star Trek. Captain Kirk died very soon and never went on his 5-year mission, and basically that meant that the Romulans and the Klingons were the dominant power in that alternate universe. That's what you're talking about.
Okay, it's been a long time since I've watched Star Trek. Anyway, I think we've gone over now, so I think we'll close up. So thanks everyone for coming. Add me to your circles. Make sure you add the right one so we can do it next time. 2 weeks, and we'll probably have a topic for 2 weeks' time. And I'm sorry that no debate went ahead, but there probably will be a debate at some point when I get around to it. I've decided that for future reference, if this show ever does host a debate, what we'll do is we'll host it an hour before the start time. That way, if people want to do a one-on-one debate, they can do it an hour before, and then it doesn't waste anyone else's time, so we can still do it as normal. But that's not going to be happening anyway. Thanks everyone for coming, and bye.